So thank you all for being here. So thankful for you. I actually counted today, and this is the 28th, I believe, 28th edition of Find Calm here. It's been a long journey from the end of April to now, and I'm so excited because we're gearing up for 2021 and all of the amazingness of sharing more calm. I have speakers booked into February. I just booked a February speaker, so we have booked out into February, and I'm really
Wow.
excited. Yeah, I'm really excited to share so much with you all. This community really started because I wanted to share resources around finding calm that I found that helped me when I was in a really stressful office job, was feeling overwhelmed, had panic attacks. I was in debt and $46,000 of debt, which is why we're talking about budgeting, because it's one of the things that I learned helped me, brought some calm to me when I learned how to create a budget, stick to one, and get out of debt. So all these resources are really here to help anyone who needs it. But we're going to start focusing more on business strategy and entrepreneurs and people who are developing a either location independent business or strategies around how to support yourself as you grow as a business owner or entrepreneur. So I think that's going to be our shift in focus going into 2021. If you guys have feedback, I am going to try to send a shorter survey. I know that I got feedback from Steph that it was a little longer, so I'm going to shoot you over a short survey. If you can give us feedback, what you'd like to see happen with the Find Calm Here community in 2021 or going forward, let us know. And with that, I'm going to go over to Ryan, and he's our partner for today, talking about budgeting and how we can find a little bit of calm. So Ryan, if you would like to start, go for it.
Let me step into. Can I see the screen there? Ooh, let's go here. My first time presenting on this. Oh, perfect. It's got the window up there too. So yeah, so I am Ryan Sefko. Going to talk about budgeting and money today. So it should be fun. A little bit about me. So really, you don't have to read the whole thing, but I'm just ordinary guy. Work a corporate job. You know, probably about a decade or so ago, I started to think more heavily around like, how do I want to exit the rat race at some point in time and retirement and all those kind of things. I think when my parents were starting to go through that exercise, and that's when I really started to get serious about my money, my finances. And um, if you remember back, 10, 11, 12 years ago, that was the housing crisis. So that always jumped to the forefront of my mind. So it's just some simple facts about me, like just so you kind of understand my background. To this day, my parents still every day or every month track all the receipts that they have. So every penny that comes in, every penny that goes out, they know where that money's coming. I started back right after 9/11 when I graduated college as a call center rep and have built my career from there. But I made a lot of like what people call probably ill-advised things. So junior year of college, I bought a motorcycle for some reason. Was in my job for a few months and then bought a brand new car. Bought a house like a year or so after I started that job. So there's nothing special about me really when it comes to any of this stuff. Like I just have invested in my own self-improvement and invested in courses in myself and really understanding my behaviors and how I tick and how that applies to, especially around my money, right? How I spend, how I budget, keep money. Case in point, I can't keep cookies at home. Otherwise, I'll just eat them all. But one of the
I
things
was I was just about to say, is the cookie a strategy for like keeping your budget? Because if you're like, you have a cookie budget and you're like, whoa, I can't go over the cookie budget, so only one
no, it's
cookie.
it's it's saying I don't have a lot of self-control. Uh, so like I make ill-advised purchases. I don't have self-control, but I think as we chat, you'll probably hear that through my self-investment and self-improvement that I have found ways to mitigate that. So even if you're sitting here going, well, geez, some of these tactics won't work for me, I guarantee you, like if you apply yourself and you invest a little bit of time in yourself and you leverage some technologies like I have, it becomes pretty straightforward and simple to keep yourself on track. So covering some of the goals for today, really just understanding how budgeting and managing your finances can help you find calm. We'll talk about some of the common reasons why people try to avoid budgeting. I'll share some of the resources to help take control. It's really about finding clarity in your own life. So there's a few prompts towards the end of the deck. We'll have you guys either break off into own sessions, or we'll just kind of do it as a group thing and really talking about finding calm for yourself. And then we'll close up with some actionable steps and Q&A so that you can walk away with actual strategies, even specific to your situations, on how you can move forward. Sound good? Awesome.
I'm in.
Great. So some of the common reasons, the ostrich method, you're just going to bury your head in the sand and you're afraid to confront your spending. It's like my cookie thing. Like if I don't count my cookies, if I don't count my calories, they really don't count, because by the next day I'll forget what they are. But somehow when I get on the scale, it's going in the wrong direction. So if you don't measure, you can't really track. There's a belief that budgeting means that you're missing out. So like you can't go out with your friends, or you can't buy that thing that you really want. It kind of can feel too daunting. And I shared that, my parents track every single receipt. That sounds really daunting, but they're old school. There are now technologies these days that can help this become super easy. And then one thing that I hear a lot is, my parents really never did this, so I never got in the habit of having a budget. My friends don't do it, so why would I have to? Why should I do a budget? Does any of those sound familiar? Cool. So I think because it keeps on binging. So really, why budget, right? I think for me, it comes down to being able to set goals and visions for how you want to spend your money. It really helps you to understand where your money is going. It can provide clarity and help keep you on track. So you got your goal and vision, and you can, by keeping an eye on where your money's going, you're able to really keep yourself on track. So if we all have a bad month, we all have bad days. So, but that doesn't mean that you're completely off the wagon if you have one bad day, or you have one bad purchase, or 1 month gets crazy. You can just get yourself right back on track with a budget. They're easy to do, and by knowing what you have coming in and going out, it can help relieve stress, especially if you start building and saving for the future. So if you have that buffer there, like if you have $1,000 saved up and you have unexpected car issue pop up, it becomes a lot easier to weather that. And then really, to me, the knowledge is power, and not knowing doesn't mean it's not happening. So it goes back to the ostrich thing about just keeping your head buried in the sand. Just because you're not acknowledging it doesn't mean that it's not something that's still impacting your life. In fact, I find the unknown is actually more stressful than actually being aware and owning your situation. So really, just how to make a budget. First thing, just keep it simple. You can get super complicated with these things. My flow is fairly manual, fairly complex, but that's because that I enjoy it. Just like some people like, what do they do with coffee? I don't drink coffee, so you got the coffee tea, like you have to make it by hand, and versus
Are you talking about like steaming or brewing?
Yeah, like all that kind of stuff. Like some people want to be like really hands-on.
Oh yeah, I like to grind, and then I used to do a French press.
Yeah. yeah, see, I don't drink coffee, and see, I
What's
just
wrong with you? No, that's
and I
part of
just
your
drink hot
budget
water.
plan.
No, I just never liked it. But to me, like tea's easier because I can just, hot water, put a bag in, and I'm done. Like, but yeah, just keep it simple. I mean, the first step really is, you just need to know what's coming in. Um, if you're working a corporate job, it'll probably be, what gets deposited into your account or the check that you get. Can be a little bit more complicated if you're, an entrepreneur or, self-employed. But I think you should have an idea once you start tracking how much money you actually, or actually should be making that conscious decision about how much you're going to pay yourself, and use that for your budget. And then just picking out the budgeting methods, and we'll get to that on the next slide about some different options. But then the next step is really just category. So I think we all have the shared one, like lodging. So your mortgage or your rent, you've got your food, you've got your transportation, your internet, cell phone, utilities, entertainment, subscriptions, personal care items, all of that stuff. So everybody's going to have slightly different things. So it's a very personal decision on both what do you track, or how do you bucket yourself, and really then how much you want to allocate to those different areas. And everybody's going to have a slightly different thing. I allocate a lot of money towards travel because travel is a priority for me. Whereas like groceries, I can keep my groceries pretty decent, pretty low. Yeah, so I think I want to make sure that make sure you're building an expectation of savings, whether it's for nest egg, retirement, whatever it is, into your actual budget. Because if you don't build it in, don't be surprised if you turn around and go, wait, I'm not saving anything because you're not accounting for it in the budget. And that's budget is pretty straightforward and simple. And then really it's just to get yourself in the habit of tracking it, week over week, month over month, and you'll start to see where those numbers, you might go, oh, groceries are going to be 200, but then you find out that realistically you're spending 250 every month, or 400 or whatever the number is, and then you can readjust, right? And that, going back to the point around why the FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. To me, a budget is something that you can constantly renegotiate with yourself, and shift resources around. So right now with COVID, I'm not traveling. So all of my travel budget, I'm allocating to other stuff, like some of the home improvement stuff that I've been putting off for the last couple of years. So I have the fluidity, right, to shift what I'm spending around based on my situation. Like if you're traveling, especially, Deb, like if you're often traveling, your expenses for like hotels, lodging are probably going to go up, but your like electricity, your utilities back at home, food and stuff are going down. You can account for that, right? So maybe if that's how you budget. Like I break vacation eating out from different than my home groceries. So for 1 month, maybe my grocery goes down and my vacation budget goes up because I know that I'm going on a trip. And that's what I'm saying about being fluid, and you can make adjustments. But you'll get into a flow after a few months, or even once you do a full year, you'll get a good understanding of your seasonal changes as well. I think I've been tracking now for a decade. It's all in the same spreadsheet. It's all in a different tab, and I punt forward. So I have a good understanding of what my expenses are going to be, for 2020. I've already started my budgeting process for 2021, because I know roughly about how much is going to come in, give or take, and I know pretty much what's going to be going out. Travel is always the travel and discretionary, like toys, like cameras and stuff, are always my bane of my existence. So any questions about the basics around just making a budget? No?
I liked how you put the different buckets of, like, depending on your lifestyle, right? Maybe you're not traveling, but maybe you have a home improvement bucket, right? So you're wanting to make sure you're figuring out and putting money towards that. And you're calculating how much you want to save for maybe for me, for example, I don't have a home, but I want to get a car next year. And I don't have any money saved up. And I definitely know that I don't want to have a car payment because I love not having one. And if I could at least pretty much avoid that by getting a used car and being able to pay for cash with it, I mean, that would be my goal. To like figure out my price range of what kind of car I'm going to get, how much it's going to cost, and then and this is getting into the technical a little bit, but I just want to say like that's how you can really start looking at these things. Is like maybe you're not traveling, but there's other things that you want to do next year or get next year, or you need to have money for medical expenses or something that you know is coming up. So just keep those things in mind as we go through the next set of it.
Yep.
Thanks, Ryan.
And we can talk about the car stuff. I've got some. I shared in the preview my screwed up car situation where I've gone the opposite way, and why I made that decision. So yeah, some common techniques. There's a ton of different ones, but I wanted to highlight some that I do, and then some of the more common. So there's the envelope or envelope method, which is really just you physically put the cash in different folders. So if you have $200 for groceries, you put the $200 for groceries in that envelope. And when you go and get your groceries, you pay in cash and you pay out of that envelope. If there's no cash in that envelope, then you might be done with your groceries for what you're spending, or you might have to go, maybe dip into your entertainment one and get that extra 20 out of there to offset it. So for some folks,
I gotta say like, no food for you.
yeah, and like for me, this one, like I'm not, I keep cash on hand, but that's for things like go and get Chinese food or something. Like almost everything I do is digital because it's much easier for me to track. Yeah, so then zero-based budgeting concept is basically, say you have $2,000 coming in for the month, you allocate all of that, all $2,000 to where you get to zero across all of your categories, including savings or whatever. So you're basically accounting for every single one of your pennies. And it's more of a virtual envelope type technique. For me, like I use a spreadsheet. So I don't really budget. Like I track my spending. But like for me, like 10 plus years in, I don't have hard and fast rules around my different buckets because with travel and stuff, like my stuff is so fluid, but like I live by just the always stay in the black. So I work within my existing cash flow. So and that could be like cash flow from last month is paying for travel that I'm doing this month. So, but I always have a tally that tells me, am I ahead or behind? Like I don't want to ever have to dip into my savings accounts to finance, more cookies. So then there's apps. So Mint is one. I think there's Acorn. I think another one's like Every Dollar or something. When we get to the next slide, there'll be some more suggestions on that. But there's apps, and Mint, if you're not familiar with it, basically what you do is attach your bank accounts. You can attach if you've got like a 401k or any of that kind of stuff from work. You can attach all those things in there, and then within the app, it will actually keep track of all your transactions. So if you pay for everything with like a debit card or a credit card, or just any, like, even if it's ATMs, like you're taking cash out, you'll see the money coming out, and it'll actually show you your cash flow, and you can easily track what's coming in and out. And one of the cool things is, they, being electronic, they also do their own bucketing. So it may not be your exact buckets, but they'll say, hey, you're spending more money on entertainment this month than normal. Or you've got it's also a good thing for tracking fees. So they'll flag and be like, you were charged a fee. So say it was like, my one checking account is like a $2 maintenance charge every month, just because of the way it's set up. So that gets flagged for me every month saying, hey, you're paying a fee. It's a good way if you have any kind of like money leaks to be able to identify that. I think one of the ones that springs to mind, not for me, but for a friend of a friend, was a husband and wife that were not really sure where their money was going. And then they found out that he was using his debit card at like 7-Eleven or the convenience store to buy Red Bull every day at lunchtime. And if you've ever done that, they're like $4 or $5. So he was spending close to $1,000 a month just mindlessly going and buying a few things at 7-Eleven, or Wawa or Sheets or whatever every single day. And it just really added up. Starbucks or any of those kind of things, those kind of like daily things that are just habit can really quickly add up. So something like Mint can bring that to the forefront and really highlight that. And then there's the old school, just paper or whiteboard. So it could be a notebook, could be printing off a physical paper thing if you really like the feel of like pens or pencils, and tracking it by hand. So yeah, those are some of the common budgeting things. As far as the resources, I highlighted a few. You'll see. Maybe I'll start with 3. Just everything is, there's no one size fits all. So I use the, let me Google it for you. Here are some Google phrases that I use to like assemble a little bit of this list, and B, since I do SEO for a living, I just found some phrases that work. So if you want to find some different examples of budgets, simple budget. If you want to find templates, budget templates, books around money, books about personal finance, books about budgeting, you can use books about and it'll give you a bunch of like lists, and you can just pick through those. There's personal finance blogs, money podcasts. There are probably bloggers and YouTube channels for almost every single niche out there. So if one doesn't, so going over the other list, like Dave Ramsey, Chris Hogan, if they're not your speed, maybe you're more of a Susie Orman, or you're any number of other, there's specific YouTubers, millennial YouTubers talking about millennial finances, if you're a millennial. Ramit Sethi, he, at Ramit on Instagram, he posts a lot of like infographics and charts and just reminders. If you like Reddit, personal finance, you can go and read different people's stories, and there's always a lot of suggestions there, or even go ask your own question. The app Mint, or there's Every Dollar Acorn. There's a lot of apps out there. If you're just looking for, you can do personal finance apps or money apps, and you'll get a whole list, and you can check them out, figure out which one best resonates with you, which matches your needs. And then books and blogs. I like Rich Dad Poor Dad. I've read a couple times. I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Covers a lot. Ramit's really big into the psychology of money. He has a blog and a book, New York Times bestseller. And then if you're interested in like FIRE, so is it financially independent, or financial independence, retire early. So basically like extreme saving, to be able to retire early. Mr. Money Mustache is a good blog. Talks a lot about just minimalism and not needing a lot, and being able to save a ton of money and getting ideas there. So I'll pause there because the next is going to be some prompts. Any questions around resources, podcasts, budgets? I see nobody.
Thanks, Ryan, for a lot of this. There's a lot of new stuff on here. I was like, oh, I know some things, but I'm like, wow, you just like tossed out a whole bunch of stuff that I now want to check out. I've heard Rich Dad Poor Dad is a really good recommended book. And that, what's his name? Ramit Sethi? Ramit?
Yeah.
I followed him. He's really good for business strategy. So if you're somebody who's looking for business strategy, that's a good one. I know that the Location Indie Fellows, they always recommend that. I've never heard of Mr. Mustache, so that's kind of interesting. I'll have to check that out. But these are great. These are great.
He quit. He retired at like 30, 33, I think. And he's made more money off of his blog and his speaking and his affiliates and all that kind of stuff than he did. Like he's making more now than he was when he was actually working. Because the whole
It's
thing is like they saved a bunch so that they were financially secure. And so now they can go and chase their he's able to go chase what he wants to do. And he did carpentry and he just kind of lived his life and then started to blog, and the blog actually took off. And now I don't know, I assume I haven't read his blog in the last little bit, but um yeah, it's just sometimes that happens. You make a career change, you leave one thing, and mysteriously like you actually end up making more money.
Yeah, it's interesting, like just bringing up the fact that not everybody is in the place of making a lot of money right now. And I can relate to, a decade ago, I thought I was going to be in debt forever. Like I just assumed that that was my life. Like I was going to have these student loans and there's no way for me to pay them off because my income was so ridiculously low. When I was in my 20s and 30s, I was making like 22,000 a year, maybe if I was lucky. I mean, I wasn't, and then I was trying to live off of that and pay my $30,000 student loan and pay a car payment and all of these things that like were just impossible. And I was working 3 jobs at a time. I know there's people that are struggling. So it's like the only thing that I would say is if you're like in a place of like feeling overwhelmed about if you're watching the replay and you're thinking about this and like feeling like this is a lot of information, just take little steps. And maybe that first step is like, just doing some of these Google to find like what's really easy for you. Like, is it the envelope way? Is it the, do you already have, David Ramsey talks about having that first $1,000 in a savings account. So you have that emergency fund. So if you already have, do you have an emergency fund already? If you do, then you might want to start thinking about how to build that to like having 6 or 7 months of income saved up so that if you get injured, hopefully never you get sick or injured or something, you have those things. There are things to think about, but if you're really struggling, it could be a matter of taking a little step at a time. And like doing that snowball effect is another thing that his book is really great. And I can put that in the chat as well. I put a lot of email or links there already, but his book is really good. It's Total Money Makeover is what it's called. And he talks about the snowball method of tackling like your little debt first. So if you have a $300 bill or a $3,000 bill, and that's like your lowest debt, and you're like paying off, like me, I was paying off $46,000 of debt in 2015. And so I just started with like the lowest hanging fruit, which was like, I think it was $800 credit card bill at the time. And so I like, dude, it was like $100, maybe $50 this month, maybe $100 the next month. I wasn't paying a whole lot off at the time because I really didn't have a whole lot to do, but I tackled it as much as I possibly could. And I just kept moving. And then you get that momentum because then the money that you were putting towards that bill, once you get it knocked off, you go to the next and the next. And as you're like having these small little wins along the way, you're feeling really motivated and positive, and it keeps you rolling. So just to put that out there for some people that might have significant debt or just thinking about like, I don't have a lot of income. How would this work towards me? So I don't know if there's any other resources you have for that as well, Ryan, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, so I mean, you brought up Ramit, and I would say that this may not be a popular opinion, but that the fastest way to do that is invest in yourself and make more money. So I get serious about your decisions about what you're doing. And because I mean, as I highlighted, when I started, I was a call center rep. I started at 11.25 an hour, and I knew that in order to, part of like with, between I had the mortgage and, the car payment and the motorcycle and travel, I'm like, shoot, this isn't going to work for me. So that's why I went on that personal, this, self-improvement journey for career development to say, and yeah, the goal and vision saying, how much do I need to be making to live the life that I want to be living? And then it was, how do I move my job and career in that direction. Because it's the same thing. Like, there was a number of years that I was like, oh, that's what I'm going to be making, and it's going to be like that. And then it just clicked in my head that I, I, I could do something. If I make us do some changes, um, I can do, I can get myself unstuck and start. And I've been at the same company for 18 years ish now, a little bit over 18 years. So it's not linear, right? It's not like a hockey stick thing, but over time, the decisions and changes I've made have allowed me to get, um, pay off my debts. I mean, I have my mortgage now, I have the new car payment, but to pay off my debt. And then, like, my Jeep is I got it basically when I started. So it's been 18 years since I bought that Jeep, and I still, up until the last few months, that was the only vehicle I've had. So it's a lot of it as decisions. There is that habit sometimes of just getting yourself into repeated debt as well. So it's like, oh, I want a new car. This one's already 3 years old, or so you just keep on rolling over payment versus, I mean, to your credit, Deb, like buying yourself something that's used that you own in cash, and you don't have that payment, and then and it's paid for, and then you can just, almost like snowball, that money can go back in. And that's what I did. So as soon as I paid off my Jeep, I kept paying myself that amount to build up, uh, a car fund in case something was to happen with the car, whether I had to get a new one or something, whatever, just so I had that vehicle safety net. And I used that money, and that money has grown, plus my new stuff had grown to be able to cover the new car that I just got. So, and I was like, well, instead of using all that cash in a lump sum, I would rather stretch it out over month, because it was like 1.9% financing. So it's almost interest free. But maybe we should move on to the prompt, since we're, sound good, Deb?
Yeah. I was going to say, if anybody wanted to ask any questions or is curious about, like, if there's any more details that Ryan could maybe get clearer for you as far as how you could incorporate this in your strategy, you don't need to share like numbers or anything like that. So don't worry. You can just ask strategy questions as well. But yeah, the thing I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of see, and I know there's some people that aren't on camera. So I was thinking about doing breakout rooms, but that is a challenge when people are not on camera or not able to interact. So I wanted to get a poll to see, is anybody interested? Hi, Melody. She comes on now. Is anybody interested in maybe chatting a little bit about, like, is there any insecurities around budget? Are you having any feelings of like, I don't know how to stick to a budget? Because that's been a lot of my challenge, is about like, I can set a budget. I've done it. I put it all together. I've spent like a bunch of hours on one day being like, all right, today's budget day. And I put like all these things in. I set up my expenses and the income. And then I'm at the store and I buy things. And I'm like, oh, I was supposed to like have a budget for that, but I really wanted that thing. Or I forgot that I was only allowed to spend $13 and I spent 25, you know? Um, so I don't know if anybody wants to go into detail about maybe like questions around that or support on that. I know there's different methods. People do use the app. I know Adrienne, who did the minimalism talk a couple of months ago, she and I talked about the Every Dollar app, and she has it on her phone now. So she gets really excited for some reason that I don't understand, but she gets really excited about having her phone, and like she goes to buy her coffee at Dunkin' and she's putting that coffee in there. And she has plans on like how much she's contributing to her car payments so that she can pay them in 6 months or in a year or in 2 years instead of a 5-year payment plan. And you talked a little bit, which is a good point to make, is lifestyle. Are you living the life that you really want right now? And it might help you to figure out, asking the question of, am I living the life I want to live now? What are my goals? What are my lifestyle goals? Do I want to travel? Do I want to buy a house? Are you going to have kids? And that means other expenses are going to come about. And they're questions that sometimes we don't want to tackle, right? We were like, well, that's like a long time from now, and we don't have to worry about that right now. But it can be a matter of, well, let's have the conversation. If it's a partner, if there's a partner involved, or if it's you, like me, I had to like sit down and be like, okay, you really don't have the income. You just don't. And you need to figure out, how to reduce what you're spending so you can spend within what you actually have. And then other ways in strategizing. I'm a business person. I like creating new ideas around creating money, although many of them haven't worked. But just, finding ways to say, okay, well, how can I earn more? Does that mean I get I stop spending, I stopped getting paid for my time, like going out and getting hourly job versus maybe finding a way to get project-based payments, or some way that you can not be, giving your time for money, trading that time and money thing, because I know that comes up for a lot of people. There's only a certain amount of hours in the day, and we all have 24, and we all need to sleep at some point. So just thinking about those maybe, and breaking those down into like, what do I really want to do in the next 5 to 10 years, and how can I kind of start putting that in? If it's $1 a day, that adds up to $365 for 1 year. I heard somebody talk about a penny, that when they see a penny on the ground, they would pick it up to prove the point that every penny matters. Because if you pick a penny up every time you see it, and you see 5 pennies a day, that adds up if you're putting that in a jar. So like, those are some just from my mentors and from people that I've worked with and talked to about finances. It's been a big issue for me. So just wanted to share that. I'll toss it back over to you, Ryan. We can switch to the prompts, and that might be helpful to inspire some people about doing some journaling, and we'll see if we can get some creativity there.
Yep. And then the other thing, one other thing I would add, that you talked about mentors, is find somebody, going back to the goals and vision, find somebody that is where you want to be, and ask questions, and how, treat them very much like your mentor or example, and find out how. So for me right now, one of the things I'm interested in is like real estate. I really, I bought a house, but like, I don't know anything about rentals and stuff. So I'm going out, and YouTube's a great thing for finding people that are doing different things. Start to connect with the people living the life that you want to be living, and ask questions. So you want to be remote, like a remote worker, find people that are working remote. If you want to be, van life, find people that are living in, vans or SUVs or whatever. And if that's the way you want to be doing, just find out what it takes, find out what it costs, and then build that into your plan. But yeah, so Deb and I came up with a couple prompts. So the first one, keeps on doing that. First one is, how would having a budget bring calm for you? Does anybody have anything that like pops to mind?
I do. I think what Deb wrote in the comment in the beginning about awareness plus clarity, and just having the awareness and not having to question, should I be spending money on this or should I not? If you already have it allotted, then you can feel good about your decisions and calm about your decisions, or feel good and calm in knowing that you have to wait.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's like, for me, when I just, bought my car, like I knew I'd been saving towards this. I hand bought something, and it became where my Jeep was starting to have issues, and I'm like, well, I want to have something that's stable. So I went and bought a new car, and just so I have that. But I had already been budgeting that for years. When I say for years, I mean 4 years. I've been saving towards that goal. So it became a question of, okay, here's what I have to spend. Here's what's available to me. What makes sense within that budget at that number or below that number. I actually ended up spending less than what I had budgeted, just so I had a little bit of safety margin in there in case, because gas and insurance and all that stuff adds up. Deb, to your thing around looking for a new vehicle, make sure you work those things as well, right? What are the differences going to be in insurance between what you have now and that? I think you were talking about SUVs, so SUVs are not quite as fuel efficient as cars, right? So you have to work that into there. So think about the total cost of ownership for what you're looking at, and build that into the budget too. Because people are like, oh, I want to own a house, but then you've got yard work, and if you have to replace the roof, and those are the things that can trip you up a lot of times, is those sudden costs that pop up. So like I had a few years ago, my oil boiler, the furnace died on the day after Christmas. So I didn't have heat for a month and a half. Even if I wanted it, I couldn't get it because they were not installing. It took me a month and a half to actually get heat back to my house. So I had to use space heaters, so my electric bill went up. But I had already knew that it wasn't doing great, so I had budgeted for the eventual replacement. So the money was covered, but there's unforeseen additional costs and maintenance and stuff that I wasn't expecting. How about anybody else? Anybody else have anything come up when they think about Calm with budgeting?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay. So with the actual beginning process of creating the budget, do you have any kind of, how do I say, like a typical percentage allocation or something like that? Like you shouldn't be spending more than 30% on your housing or something like that.
So I personally do not, but I think that 30% for housing has popped up. So there are different allocations. For me, I would say, think about I think it's different building a budget off of where you're at right now. So if you currently are paying rent, that becomes your new budgeted amount. If you're paying rent and you're like, I think I'm paying, and then you look at your budget in totality, and it's like, hey, I'm bringing in 2,000 and I'm spending 2,500. I'm 500 in the hole. So you have to start looking through your budget and going, where can I cut money? And if say your rent is 1,000 of that, just off the top, say your rent is 1,000. Well, maybe the answer is to get yourself down below what you're bringing in. Well, the answer is either bring in more money or get yourself back down under that 2,000. So the answer might be hey, listen, with your rent, your lease is coming up. Maybe you need to find a place that's more like 750 or 800 to find additional money because you're paying too much in. Yeah. So as you look at your buckets, everybody's buckets are different. For me, I bought this house when I was a rep. So my mortgage is a smaller percentage of my budget than if I was to go out and buy a house. Probably now, where I'm at in my career, I would probably be looking at a house much larger than what I have, just that nature of the beast. If I wasn't already on this budget mindset. So for me to get in a place like where I'm at now, I would be paying like an extra 150, 200 a month on mortgage. But it's just because I've been in this house for 15, 16 years now. I'm still kind of like, yeah, so I'm paying less. But I think that's what I would say is like, figure out what, like track where you're at now and then figure out where you want to, like, not cut corners, but where do you want to tweak things? And you might go, hey, listen, I work from home, right? I work from home or work from wherever, my apartment or something. I need to have this much space, and that may dictate some of it as well. Like you may find that you're actually not spending as much on lodging as you really feel that you should be. And maybe your place is in a place that you don't want to be living. Like, and that's another part of it, right? Is you could be living in a place, like say you work actually a physical place and you're driving 30, you have a 30-minute commute. Maybe it makes more sense to move closer to work and spend less on gas and car maintenance and everything, and you make that money back. So your rent goes up, but your other costs go down because you're not putting as much wear and tear. So instead of replacing your car every 8 years or every 4 years, maybe it's every 6 to 7 years or 8 years or whatever. Or maybe you can work remote and work from home. And now, like in my case, like sometimes there's years that I might drive less than 5,000 miles. So I might be there's some years I've driven less than 3,000 miles in a year because I work from home. So I think it differs, but I think for me, 25, 30% for lodging seems to be where I want to be as I start to add everything else on.
You brought up a good point though about working. Most of us are working from home right now, or like limiting our travel and gas. So like if I needed, like when I was commuting to my office job for 40 minutes each way, then I moved to my apartment, which then I had a 4-minute commute to work. My gas budget didn't need to be as high anymore. So I could reallocate that money when I moved closer to my job. And now I work from home. So there is zero unless I decide to go when I go to the store and things like that. I do need some gas for like groceries and, errands and places I go sometimes. But obviously this year we've all kind of had a little bit extra in our gas budget fund maybe. And so you could reallocate that to either knocking out more debt or putting more in savings or figuring out what else you need. Maybe there's another expense. For example, I invested in a business. I needed money for that. I also I have a standing desk. So I got a standing desk from Amazon so that I could have an office space. I created an office space for myself working from home so that I could be more comfortable. So those are all things that maybe you could add into quality of life. Like, how do you want to work when you're working from home? And then figure out what would be your ideal living space. I created a budget for when I did my interior design project for my apartment. Because I put together, okay, how much do I have to spend on furniture and all of the other details that I wanted to bring in. And then I said, okay, well, if I only have, I think my budget was like $600 or $700 for a couch. And that was like a lot of money. Luckily, I had some credits with my company that I got some debit cards because I had gotten it as a bonus. And so I ended up, using gift cards to pay a $700 couch. So finding unique ways of like, and maybe you trade, and maybe it's where you start to trade or you sell some things. You're finding, that's the other thing we talked about, minimalism earlier a couple of months ago. And like, it really goes well with budgeting, right? Because you can find what am I really using and what I'm not using. And so then you can also say, all right, well, I'm not, maybe you have a sailboat, for example. I don't have a sailboat, but maybe you have a sailboat sitting outside and you're not taking it out, every month. And so it's like, I'm not really using this. So that's like a big idea of something, but you get just finding things that you don't need. And that's the extra money. Like you have everything that is in your house has a monetary value. Just like everything you bring into your house has a monetary value. So just adding those kind of components can help you like in other ways to find maybe there's money under those couch cushions or or something that can add up later.
For me, like you don't have any home decorations. Like I just have plain white walls and put all my money. Because to me, like I like if you put me like like my office is basically just all white wall. I have nothing. I have a couple whiteboards hanging up. But that's it. But I don't need those things. Like I don't have I get people mock me like you don't have anything on your walls. I'm like I don't. My walls are for working. Like I've got whiteboards. Like I don't need to. I don't spend them. I don't come to my office to be surrounded by that. I have my monitors and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, and
It depends on your priorities, is what
it's
you're
the
saying.
priorities. Yeah. So for
Yeah.
me, like those are not. But a comfortable chair, heck yeah. Like because I'm sitting in it all day long. I want to make sure that my office chair, my tushy is comfortable. Like that's my priority is like physical comfort because I don't want to deal with the back pain and those things. Like standing desk, standing desks have been on my list, but like I'm I have a spending problem on both sides. Both a frugality side that goes, I could like a standing desk. I see how much they cost. That's okay. I'd rather allocate that. I'll suffer and allocate that money to other things. And I'm in that, you know, since turning 40 this year, this is I'm going to call it a Jubilee year. It is a year for me to treat myself to things. That's why I got the new vehicle this year and, you know, getting all sorts of other stuff done around the house. Cause that's like, it's my year to celebrate myself and prepare for, you know, my next 10 years, the next decade. Right. And then I'll hopefully go back to more normal spending habits. Not normal for me to spend the amount of money that I have in the last few months. But like you can't take the money with you when you die. So sometimes it does make sense to, but I spend money on travel. Like but this year I'm not traveling, so I'm choosing to spend it on things that my physical space here and my house so that that's covered. So I tackle this. And so speaking of budget, like going back to that, one of the things that I did to help remove some of the unknown is probably about 2 years ago, I systematically went around my house and my life and said, what are expenses that I haven't accounted for? So eventually I'm going to need a new fridge or mattress, new roof, and this and that. And I wrote all those things down and I put a cost associated with it. So I have clarity around how much money, like if all these things were go at the same time, how much money would I have to have without like putting it all in credit card debt or whatever.
Right.
And then that became my goal that, you know, I not that I necessarily need to have all that money on hand, but I need to, whether it's through, you know, stocks or whatever, like have that at least somewhat accessible or have a path to get to that in a very near future. So if I had to put stuff on a card and you know, carry a balance month to month for a while, how many months would I need to do that? Or could I get like a equity line of credit? Like, to investigate those things so when the situation actually happens, that I'm prepared for the situation.
Sure.
And that removes some of the doubt or the concern. Because you think about like, it's kind of morbid, but it's like planning for your funeral ahead of your funeral so that when you pass away, like your family doesn't have to make those decisions because you go in and buy, and unfortunately I've had some family friends have to go through this lately. But they had pre-planned, like you go into funeral home, right? They want to sell you like the Rolls Royce of caskets, and do you want this and you want that? Because it's upsell. Same thing with buying a car. They always want to sell you on all the features and benefits. But if you make the decision, say, I just need like a wooden box, that's all, or a cardboard box, that's all you need to do. You remove that, you've made that decision ahead of time. You're not putting that decision on other people to make.
And with that lovely thought about that it is a real thing, and it's amazing to bring it up because it's hard to think about end of life and things like leaving those questions to others. But they're things we're talking in the prompt second. We only have a few minutes left, so I definitely want to leave at least a minute or two for questions. If you want to stop sharing, we'll go back to our main screen. 30, 90, and 60, 365 days. Just kind of having that, and maybe that's something you guys write down later after the call, thinking about that and thinking, okay, where do I want to be? And I've used that with income goals for sure. Like there was years when I, was making little amounts of money and wanted to make more. And so those were some of my vision board. Actually, I used vision boards to put those statements out there. This year I started with abundance. Was one of my mission statements when we had our first event this year in January. Leah was there before all the craziness. And so it's nuts. It feels like a million years ago, Leah. Anybody have any questions for Ryan or any comments, anything that you guys were excited about to like, maybe you're going to start your budget now, you're ready? Is everybody like, woo, budget? No jumping up and down, dance party about budgets.
Budgets are fun.
Dan's dancing
Someone's
back there.
dancing back there.
Yeah, my brother-in-law is all excited about the budget.
I'll tell you, like budgeting and money is fun. And that may be my perspective about things, but like I had early on in my when I was, the call center rep and had all this debt, like that housing crisis in 08, 09 hit hard because it's like, we were also going through a time where like our company was maybe being sold and I was worried about my job and, what would happen if I lose all this stuff, like how am I gonna pay these bills? And that's when I was just like, I can't go on like that. So, I've spent the last decade thinking about how to get away from that. And I've been fortunate enough and determined enough to get my stuff together. In at least in this regard, I'm a mess in so many other areas, but at least in the finance area, like I put a lot of work into getting the stuff on track where, Deb, this is how the conversation started, right? We were on a call, was it April or May, and we were talking about COVID, and I basically said, no, like I'm not, I have 100% calm around finance and money. Like it's not a concern for me right now. And we were going, we had just gone through a merger, and there was a chance I was going to get laid off, but like it wasn't a concern because I've built this life that I chose.
Yeah, that's a great way to end. It's about choosing what you want in your life. And, if budgets kind of overwhelm you or something, it comes down to numbers. And if you just like disassociate the emotions from it and say, okay, the reality is this is the income and this is my expenses. How do I make it so that I make more than I'm spending? And if you keep it that way, it lets go of that anxiety about all of it and just say, okay, it's just numbers and I'll figure it out. Everything, I love that book by Maria Forleo. Everything is figure outable.
Yep.
Which is another good point to just bring back to the thing of, wherever you're at, wherever you're starting, if you want to start tomorrow, create a budget, figure out where you're starting from. You need a starting point to move forward and to reach all your goals. So I hope everybody learned a little bit about budgets, and maybe you feel you're going to do some Googling and find some resources to help you create a budget. Ryan is in the Find Calm Here community. You can feel free to reach out to him if you want to chat with him more about how he has built some really great structures around his finances. And he's done some amazing travel trips that he's saved up and paid for.
And I travel cheap too.
And you travel on a budget, which is another thing to talk about. That could be a whole nother chat, is traveling on a budget, right? Because you could either travel luxuriously and spend lots of money, or you could travel like a local, as Lily was telling us a couple of weeks ago in the other Find Calm event. And if you don't stay in those resorts and you're staying in town with where all the locals live, you're not spending the money that the other people are spending.
So last year around this time, I took my mom to, she'd always wanted to go UK and Paris. So 2 people for like, is like just under 2 weeks for about $2,000.
That's amazing. That's awesome. That's pretty much what I just spent to go to California. So I might need to get your suggestions for my next trip whenever we can travel again.
Yeah, I don't know how valid my strategies are going to be in this current COVID and post-COVID world, because cheap airfare, well, I guess cheap airfare still exists, but I'm not tracking as many deals as I used to. So
what I want to wrap up with, we're going to wrap up because we're right after 8 o'clock here. But Melody made a comment about being consistent, and I want to just speak to that because it takes diligence. But it's a like when we talked about priorities, how much do you want to take a trip or buy a house or buy a car? I mean, it's all about being really diligent about, this is what I want my life to be. And you can keep motivated with vision boards, like we talked about in some other calls. You can keep motivated by connecting, like Ryan said, connecting with other people who have similar interests and how they do things, or find ways of making more income so that you can get to places you want in life. So, but I think there's a lot of different ways. It just depends. Use the Find Calm Here community, use our group here, because there's amazing resources in there, and we have that global community. So share anything you've got going on in the Find Calm Here community. Next week, which is kind of related, we're talking about journaling. So I love journaling. I journal every day. I know Priscilla journals. I know Melody, I think, journals a little bit. Leah journals. Ryan, I don't know if you journal, but journaling can be a really powerful tool. We'll talk more about that. So I was going to ask Stephanie to chat a little bit about her strategy, which is the bullet journal. So she's going to be leading us in the Find Calm Here chat about journaling next week. Just to preview a few events coming up in November, we have a Finding Calm with Feeding Kids. So if you're a parent, like my sister is over there, and she's got the little kid that just doesn't want to eat anything, this is helpful for any parents or anybody. If I'm a aunt, so if I have to hang out with Joseph, which I do sometimes, maybe it'll help me pick up some tools or just better habits for me to eat. So we have Finding Calm with Feeding Kids. We have a Finding Calm with hiking coming up in November. That's going to be really exciting. I have a partner coming on to talk about that. And then I haven't posted up yet, but just to give you the preview, we are going to do at the end of November, before the holiday, we're going to do one about morning routines, about waking up at sunrise, because I know that's been a lot of some conversation about how to build a morning routine. So that's another partner that I just talked to from Florida 2 days ago, and she's going to be coming on Find Calm Here to chat about that. So with that, I will wrap it up. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing your amazing resources and expertise. And I'm going to have you guys wave out and say goodbye and have a great evening. And we'll talk to you next time on Find Calm Here.
Bye. Thank you. Peace out.